it's been 20 years since we started taking our daughters to work. We've made a lot of progress. What are the issues women need to think about today to make it? What are the big stumbling blocks out there, challenges?
I always think, you know, we've made a lot of progress. We've made extraordinary progress, actually. I think this breakfast and the fact that everybody got up so early to be here is an indication of the progress and our interest in progress and an indication of our ambition. But the thing that continues, I think, to be the biggest challenge for women is focusing on the money. How many women in the audience will just put their hands up and say that they want to make more money? Because that's what we all want to do. And yet, when we get into the business, we don't necessarily set those goals high enough to get beyond where most women are, which is still at $50,000 or less in annual gross revenue in a business. And we're still, you know, 74 cents on the dollar. So the focus on the money is one that I think we all need to really put front and center so that we make the money and can hire people and leave a business to our children.
Katherine, you're with an initiative called 10,000 Small Businesses?
Yes.
Why 10,000? What's the magic behind that number?
So at Goldman Sachs, we're an incredibly quantitative organization. So if we made a $500 million commitment, we wanted to say what we were going to, what the result would be. So the goal is to educate and provide capital to 10,000 entrepreneurs across the US and UK. So that was one, is just to make a commitment and to stick to it. The other piece was to be ambitious. Reaching 10,000 entrepreneurs is a high bar. We're at just about 5,000 so far. Those 5,000 small businesses that we've reached so far employ 100,000 people and have $3.2 billion in revenue. So we're going for ambition as well.
Kavita, tell me a little bit about this miracle paper. How did you get started? Where did the idea come from? And if you knew what you knew today, would you still do it?
That's a great question. So this is it. It's actually a simple little sheet of paper that's infused with organic spices. And FreshPaper actually started pretty serendipitously. It started as a middle school science project that was looking into a home remedy that my grandmother in India once gave me after I drank some dirty tap water. So that was the origin. I never thought it would lead to me starting a social enterprise. I certainly never thought it would lead to Fenugreen as it is today, where we're working to actually bring this technology into the food system from farm to fork. So we started out at a little farmer's market about 3 years ago. And actually, it was an article with the Washington Post. Jane Black from the Washington Post wrote an article about us after we'd been at the farmer's market for a few months. And that was the moment that everything changed. Today, we ship to farmers and families in about 35 countries. Wow. And we're working with some of the largest retailers in the world. But you asked if I would have done this if I knew what it would take. And the story behind FreshPaper is that it actually took me about a decade of trying and failing and doing it as a nonprofit, which really didn't work out. And I think if I knew today everything that would be involved in going from making a couple hundred sheets in the kitchen of my studio apartment to making millions of sheets and supplying people all over the globe, I probably would have been really intimidated. So I think in many ways it was sort of how much I didn't know that encouraged me to go into the food industry, to go into one of the world's largest industries and take on a problem as massive as food waste, even though I kept failing because in some ways I had no idea what I was getting into. But now that I know, I think I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Katherine, do you find that with the entrepreneurs that you work with, do a lot of them sort of think small instead of thinking about the possibilities? Are they intimidated by the challenge?
I think that they're probably on both extremes. Some think they want to be a $100 million business and don't have a plan to get there, and some think that they're going to be, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, a $150,000 business, and that's their definition of success. Yeah. I'll say too that, and we were talking to Georgetown Cupcake, who you'll hear from later about this, I've yet to meet a small business owner who started their business because they want to run a business. Thousands of business owners who I've met all started their business because they liked their trade. They were passionate about whatever they were doing. And that's, I think, why providing business skills to entrepreneurs is so important, because we can complement that. We can't replace their entrepreneurial spirit that they have in loads, but their desire to grow their businesses is something that we can help with.
Nell, you mentioned that money's the big issue. Where do entrepreneurs go to get money?
Wow, that is the question. What did I hear the other day? Friends, families, and fools. But I think what's important for women to recognize is that is where most men get their initial money, is from their friends and family. So that's step one. And since the recession, that is often step 2 and step 3, because there is less money available in a lot of areas. I think the other thing you really have to look at is participating in competitions is very important to get, to raise your visibility. And looking at the alternative kinds of financing there is out there. There continues to be out there for women. And obviously there are programs at the SBA. But more than anything, it's being clear about what you need the money for, and being able to explain very succinctly what's the money for, how you're going to pay it back, how's it going to, grow your company. Because often, I have been approached for years by women who say, I need money. I mean, who can't say that? You got to say, I need this to do this, and this is how I'm going to pay you back, and this is how you're going to make money if you put money in me. And that is the dialogue and the conversation that we all need to get very comfortable and familiar with, as opposed to hoping and praying that somebody recognizes that we have a really great idea and that somebody's going to give us the money. We got to be able to talk people into giving us the money and showing them that we have something that's worth putting money in because it's going to make money.
Kavita, does that sound familiar to you?
Well, as I mentioned, I started out by going to my local farmer's market. And I started with a couple $100s. And for such a long time, in the years before, I'd been told that I needed more experience, or I needed more degrees, or I needed more money. And I think that actually held me back for quite a while, because I felt like I needed this huge production infrastructure, and I needed all these resources to get something so simple into places in the developing world. My dream originally was to get this to people in India and Africa, people like my grandmother, who didn't have access to refrigeration, because over 1 billion people lived without access to refrigeration. But I think I almost was about to give up, and that's when I went to the farmer's market, kind of as a last hope. But that was where the money first started to come. And frankly, the money made a big difference. We were making, especially after the word got out with the article and then through word of mouth, this grassroots movement funded our first production facility. It funded our ability to get into Whole Foods. It funded us getting out of my apartment. So, it does make a big difference. But I think you're right. Getting your idea out there and finding people who will believe in it, whether it's through a Kickstarter or a farmer's market or through investors, I think is part of the first step in getting out there.
And the one thing I did forget to say is the most easiest way to make money is through sales. Sales, like you just described, because that's what started to happen in the farmer's market.
Yeah.
People started to buy it.
And that gave me the belief, too, that
Yes.
I could make this happen. And that was really important for me personally.
Yeah.
Katherine, you work with, again, a lot of entrepreneurs. Have some made it big, or what are some of the success stories?
Absolutely. 2 I'll share with you. One is Payal Kamdar. She runs a company called We Solve It. It's GIS mapping software. And she has grown from $700,000 to $13 million. She now employs 125 people. And it really touches on what Nell was saying in terms of she knew she wanted to work with the government. She knew she wanted government contracts. And she spent the end deliverable for 10,000 small businesses is a detailed growth plan. She knew her 5-year forecast. She knew how many people she needed to hire. She knew what skill set she needed to hire. She had that all laid out on paper so that when she was pitching her business, the people that she was pitching said, wow, this woman knows her stuff. The other person is Teresa Lawrence, runs a staffing company out of New Orleans, didn't go to college. She was at $2 million starting at the start of the program. Now she's at $5 million. And Maury Tiarapour is here, who teaches our negotiations class, which is one of our most popular modules for the program. But her negotiations skills that she honed in the program, she had the courage to walk away from contracts and say, I'm not going to make any money on that. Why should anybody do something that they're not going to make money on? And she walked away from her biggest client, and they called her back on a Friday, and they called her back on a Monday, and they said, all right, we'll meet your terms.
What is there a common thread? Is there something that gets somebody from a $1 million company to a $13 million company?
I would say that having a couple of things. One is this growth plan. Having a plan where you know your business vision. It can change, but you have to know what you're striving for. Another key piece is confidence. And the third piece is willingness to acquire debt. We meet a lot of businesses who aren't willing to take on debt. It's a source of pride for them. Like, I'm so excited, I have no debt, but if you want to be a $13 million business, at some point in time, you're going to need to take on some debt.
Nell, talk to me a little bit about confidence. How important is confidence?
It is, particularly when you're asking people for money, or you're looking to raise money, or you're selling. You got to believe, or you got to fake it till you make it. I mean, you really have to indicate that you have confidence in yourself and your ability to pull this off. And I always tell a story. If there's a job application, there are 10 qualities that they're looking for in the job, or 10 things, and if a man has 2, he says, hey, I'm your guy. I can do it because I have confidence in myself to grow into this. A woman looks at the same application and she's got 8 of the qualities. She thinks she has to go back to school to get the other 2. So it is really understanding your strengths and what you're best at and making those visible and being clear that that's enough to take whatever you're doing to the next step.
Kavita is being very humble. She started her business when she was in middle school. I mean, the idea, right?
I started working on the idea, yeah.
Middle school. She got a patent before you went to college, right?
In my senior year of high school.
How many high schoolers get a patent?
I was the weird kid rotting fruits.
How many women are like this, right?
That's confidence.
That's confidence.
That is confidence.
But did you have mentors along the way? Were there people who helped you, and who were they? What sort of people helped you as you kept moving along?
Yeah, and I think what Nell was saying really resonated with me, because I think if there's one thing I've learned in this journey, which for me now has been, over a decade, I really believe, I really believe that you become what you believe. And I think all of my mentors along the way have shown me that the story of FreshPaper, and my story, is not really about the technology or about what I was able to do with it, but it's about all of the people who, at every step of the way, when I was about to give up, stepped up and showed me what was possible. And I think, when I was a kid, I really believed that I could do something with this technology, that I could get it out into the world and it could help people and, maybe help hunger across the world. But as I grew older, like many young women, I started to lose some of that confidence. And I stopped believing that I was enough. So I think, it was people like my high school science teacher, Mr. Rohde, who first believed in me and showed me that this was more than just a science project. And then it was people like Tony, a 3rd-generation farm stand owner, who was one of the first people to ever buy FreshPaper and put it in his store. And he showed me how to build a business from the ground up. But I think it was often people that I didn't even expect would be mentors that came into my life when I started to share my idea and my vision that really made a huge difference and showed me how to believe not just in myself, but in dreaming a bigger dream than I could even dream for myself.
Katherine, can this be institutionalized? Can we systematically attack the issue of mentorship and networking and technical?
In my opinion, absolutely. I think 84% of our businesses do business with each other. Entrepreneurs are natural networkers. So we don't need to teach them to network. We need to help them with their networks. And I think that access to an education should be low-hanging fruit for entrepreneurs, as should access to capital.
Yes, well.
And these are manageable problems to solve, and they're also incredibly scalable problems. So you can do this in a state, you can do this in a country, you can do this globally.
Nell, not everyone owns a business. People have various roles in businesses. What should women be thinking about in terms of the roles they can play to support businesses and others when they're working inside a company?
The most important thing for everyone in this room is to figure out what you are absolutely the best at. Because for the entrepreneur who has a business, she has to figure out what she's best at, because then you need to surround yourself with people who are best at the things that you are not best at. So that if we all operate from confidence and clarity about what we are best at, what we are really good at and confident about, you start to be able to create these teams of people, men and women, who create a whole that is really unstoppable. But I think that the challenge for a lot of us is we're still fearful about hiring people that are smarter than we are, or we believe that we have to do everything ourselves. So I think it's breaking out of those two real impediments to growth whether you are an employee or a first employee in a business or a partner in a business or wherever you find yourself, what are you best at? How do you fit yourselves together with a team of people who are brilliant and then can take these concepts forward? I think it's those things.